Hello and welcome to the show. This is Everything Under the Sun. My name is Ty. I hope all of you are doing as fantastic as possible and doing the things that make you feel good, and surround yourself with people that make you feel good because, that's just as important. But as many of us may know, we have a newly elected president of the United States, Joe Biden, with Vice President Kamala Harris, and this was a pretty big election. And I think in my last episode, I was expecting the results to be in by the time the episode aired, but that wasn't the case because, again, like this was an election that I guess was during a time that I don't think we've ever experienced before. So the voting took a lot longer, and I think that there are still some people that are feeling as though it's debatable as far as whether Joe Biden actually won the election or not. But, that's neither here nor there. Not anything that I'm going to discuss right now, but as of the results and, the Associated Press and like everything else, we have a new president of the United States, Joe Biden, and he will take office noon, January 20th. And I didn't realize it was specifically at noon on January 20th, but that's officially when the new presidential term starts. So that's that news, and I think we'll kind of see what our future is going to look like. I think that's kind of what the mindset is anytime we have an election, anytime we have a new leader coming into office. It's like, what does this mean for our future, and how's this going to look for us? So that's hopefully we'll have some prosperity in our future, but that's just wishful thinking. Here we go. In other news, there was also, there have been deaths recently. Sean Connery, many people know him from James Bond, the original James Bond, and I think that there's definitely a lot there. I think there was just like an entire following with James Bond movies and things like that. So that was definitely a loss. Many people also know of the host of the Jeopardy game show, Alex Trebek, also passed away from pancreatic cancer, which he was struggling with for a while. And this was something that really kind of like hit me in like a hard place. Not necessarily because, Alex Trebek, he's, people love him because of his time on the show, but just like the fight with cancer, I think that that's so difficult and challenging because I thought he was in remission. I thought that, like he was actually doing better and that he was going to retire from the show and, kind of just do that because, he had gone through this fight, but I guess, it kind of just came back, and that's something that is just so awful about this awful about cancer, in general. I think that it's really something that families go up and down with struggling with, and it's just so unfortunate, when we lose loved ones to something like that. So they were saying in the article that he died peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by people that he loved. So I think that's the best way that any of us can kind of move on in this life. But I think that just as we think about the death of these people that may be in the limelight, maybe people that a lot of us know of, death still happens to the people that are close to us and the people that are around us. And there is an episode that will be on death because that's a topic that's in the box. But I think this just kind of reminds me specifically just to value and appreciate life a lot more. I think there's so much of life that we don't really acknowledge or that we take for granted in so many respects because we feel as though, like tomorrow is going to happen, that tomorrow is guaranteed, and it's not guaranteed. Like not even the rest of this day is guaranteed for any of us. So, value the things around us, value the beauty that lies within us, the things that we have in our lives that we can be appreciative for. And, because life is short and it's something that, we shouldn't take for granted. So that is what that is. And I think I want to kind of get this episode going because there's definitely a lot with this episode, this idea of wisdom, which is what this episode is about, and just everything that entails, because I definitely had this idea of wisdom, and I think that as I was looking into this idea a lot more, that idea of wisdom within my own mind expanded exponentially and made me kind of realize that maybe I don't know this idea. And it's kind of strange that we have this kind of back and forth where it's like the more you know, the less you realize and it's kind of just like it opens more doors for questions. So that's kind of what happened as I was delving into this topic, and that's not a bad thing because, as we realize the expansiveness of a topic, we can explore it a lot more in depth. So that's really amazing. So I'm going to get this box happening. This box is full of all the topics that were recently suggested and the topics that were in there before. And, thank you so much. It's a full box. I'm very happy for all the topics that all of you are sending in. everything.sunpodcast@gmail.com. If any of you have any other topics that you would love to send in, again, the episode with the box will tell you what topics are in the box and the topics that were recently put in the box, and you can kind of just decipher what you want to put in, or you can kind of just freeball it and send a topic to me, and I can tell you whether or not it's been suggested already. But it helps a lot if you already know what's in the box. But anyway, topic for next week is going to be what I pull out of this box. And let's see. I wonder if it's one of the new ones that I put in. It's all on receipt paper, like I said before. And it is. Look at that. It's one that I just put in. Immigration. And this is a topic that I think is going to be something so relevant for all of us as the world starts to expand more, as people start to connect more, and people just want to be in the world more. It's like I plan on maybe moving to another country at some point, so it's like I'll be an immigrant there, and it's just like there are just so many things that are within this idea of immigration, and how maybe like these borders that we set up, these boundaries that we set up, may not really be as useful when it comes down to expanding the world and trying to make this kind of more of a world community rather than just like our country community that we have come to understand. I don't know. Anyway, that's the idea for next week, or topic for next week is going to be immigration. And again, I think that'll be a great topic. So thanks for sending that in. everything.sunpodcast@gmail.com. Again, if you want to send some more topics in. So today we're going to be talking about wisdom. And I mean, it's something that I think that we kind of toss around in different modalities. Like, we have different stories that have like the wise sage, or we say that some kids are maybe wise beyond their years, or we toss around this term wise and wisdom. And really, what is wisdom? Because I had my idea of what wisdom is, like I spoke about before. And I think that as I was looking through this idea more, searching through the internet, watching videos, there were a lot of ideas that corresponded with my idea of wisdom. But again, there were a lot of ideas that also made me question how certain I was with what I felt this idea of wisdom was. So I went to the dictionary, and, well, I didn't go to an actual dictionary because I probably should open up an actual book dictionary, but I went to the internet dictionary, and this is what they defined wisdom as. And I think that, judge for yourself. So this is the definition: the quality of having experience, knowledge, and good judgment. When I first did that definition, I thought that it was very short for an idea that's so big, but again, the quality of having experience, knowledge, and good judgment. And as I dissected that a bit more, there are a lot of pieces there where we feel as though knowledge is a key component in having wisdom, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But the bigger part of this entire statement is the good judgment part, because I feel like that is the biggest piece within this definition. Because the quality of having experience and knowledge, like, you're going to gain experience and knowledge just living life. It doesn't mean that you have wisdom. Someone can have experience and knowledge from living in a dark room. It's dark all the time. I'm in a dark room. There are walls. Like, you're gaining some knowledge. You're experiencing whatever experience that is, but it doesn't mean that you're gaining any wisdom. That person may gain wisdom, but just in the fact of having experience and knowledge doesn't innately mean that you have wisdom. So I think that good judgment part is something that ties into a big concept of having wisdom, because you can have these knowledge and this experience, but how are you utilizing it? Where is it going? Like, what does it mean to have this knowledge and have these experiences, and how are you going to utilize that to advance yourself, advance the people around you, and really the world around you? And I think that's kind of what wisdom is. So again, there's this idea of knowledge, and I think that a lot of times we associate knowledge with wisdom, and that the more knowledge that you have, the more knowledge you gain, the more wise you'll become. But I think that we start to falter in that domain, because then we start to assume that just because someone may not have a formal education or as high of a degree of education means that you are more wise than them, when that's not the case at all. There are people that, have so much smarts, like book smarts, but the ability to use that and utilize that in the world around them isn't available. So that brings me to a video that I found online, and it was something that kind of just brought my attention to this idea of knowledge and wisdom, and how they're related to one another. And it's something that I resonated with a lot because it's something that I partially believe also, where it's like we don't have to have a certain level of knowledge in order to have a certain amount of wisdom. I don't think that both those are contingent on one another. So this video, it was titled Difference Between Wisdom and IQ, and it's with Jordan Peterson and Brett Weinstein. And basically they speak about, well, the question is presented, whether or not IQ and wisdom have a relationship with one another, where it's like, does a higher IQ equate to greater wisdom, and does a lower IQ obviously equate to lower wisdom? And essentially the guy is speaking about how he doesn't believe that that's something that is relevant, how he doesn't really see that that relationship exists there. And he speaks about a story about him and this woman who doesn't seem to have a very high IQ according to what he was saying, or and just many other factors. And you can watch the video yourself. I will title the video. I'm not really sure how to I'll link the video if it's possible to do that. But he speaks about how, just like, there's this woman, not very high IQ, and there's a situation that comes up that shows him, that there's something a lot more to wisdom, because the way that she acted, the things that what she presented in that moment showed him that just because she doesn't have a high intelligence, just because someone doesn't have a high intelligence, doesn't mean they're not able to read a situation and utilize the inherent wisdom that we have within us, that says that, like, this is right, this is wrong, this is the situation. And like, obviously that's going to this idea of morality, but I feel like morality is a big part of wisdom. It's how do we utilize this knowledge and experience that we have, and part of that is the moral use of those things. It's like we can see someone fall down and not do anything about it, but we can see someone fall down and ask them if they're okay. And it's not necessarily, that's not like a you're wise and you're not wise type of thing if you don't do that, but it's just more or less just the utilization of realizing that I've fallen before. That experience, that knowledge of the pain that I felt when I've fallen before, is giving me, wisdom in this situation to recognize that maybe this person in front of me is also feeling some kind of pain and may not be okay. So it's like we can bring that knowledge into a different situation, but it's only wisdom as we start to utilize it in these different forms and in different ways, But that video kind of just made me realize that there are a lot more factors within this idea of wisdom than I normally would have thought about, because of course morality is something that we think about all the time, but it's not something I necessarily associated with wisdom necessarily. But now that I have seen it, I think it makes sense. There's another video that I found. It was a TED Talk, and it was called Our Loss of Wisdom by Barry Schwartz. And he's basically speaking about how he speaks about this idea of morality, also in wisdom, and how we have this system that seems to start putting different rules and guidelines on the way that we're supposed to move, whether it's in a work situation, or just within our normal lives, that we start putting rules and boundaries up in certain ways that we're supposed to act, that we start losing that inherent wisdom that we have. And something that he called it was practical wisdom. At least I believe that. I didn't write it down, but I believe he called it practical wisdom. And he was basically saying that, as we start having more rules and these guidelines that tell us that we should be doing these certain things, there's less room for wisdom to flourish, because we grow wisdom through those situations that may not turn out that well, through the experiences of just, having our own judgment in a situation and seeing how that unfolds before us. That's how we gain wisdom. But when we're told that, like, read this a certain way, do these things at this certain time and in this certain way, we stop losing that freedom to actually choose for ourselves. And he speaks about it a lot more, clearly than what I'm doing right now, but it raised that different dynamic also, that there is this huge aspect of just personal action, personal judgment that is within gaining wisdom, because a lot of times we think that we can gain wisdom by just, learning from someone, by just reading a book or something. But, it's our actions, our immediate actions, our judgments, our decisions that that are going into those situations that are bringing us wisdom. So when we start losing the ability to freely think for ourselves and freely move in a way that we want to move, then we're also losing the ability to gain that wisdom. And that's what he speaks about more in that. So again, I'll link both those videos. But as I was watching more videos, and there were definitely a few more videos that were involved in that, but those were the two that kind of stood out to me. And as I think about those videos, and as I think about the concepts that were mentioned in the videos, I think that my idea of wisdom has just expanded a lot more. And it made me realize that, that definition earlier, they were just words, and words can be defined, like words can be clearly defined by a certain collection of other words, but does it actually get to the meaning of what it is? Like you can define a human. You can say like a human is, Homo sapien, has warm-blooded, like you can define a human in all these different domains, but can you say like who is a human? Can you answer that with words? Like who is a human? Who are you? Can you even define that? Like I don't even know that. Like for me asking myself, who am I? It's something that I can sit and kind of ponder for a while, because we can again define like this physical thing, but this is something so much more. It's a concept that's something deeper than just what words can express. And that's something that I've realized about wisdom, is like we're constantly searching for the definition of wisdom, but maybe there is no true definition of wisdom. Maybe there's no way to truly define what wisdom is, and maybe we're just on track in that way, but it's like, do we have to be able to define it in order to live by it? Do we have to be able to truly define love in order to feel love, in order to love others? I don't think that it's something that's necessary. So as I've been thinking about this idea of wisdom, my idea of it's just expanded, where it's like, like these boundaries that I didn't realize were there on this idea of wisdom were actually there. And it's like, it opens up this entire new avenue of what are my experiences, and am I gaining wisdom even though I'm not realizing it? And that's something I'm also going to speak about in a little bit. But, as we go through life, we seem to always search for wisdom. And in that search for wisdom, it's like we're always wondering, it's like, am I wiser? Am I actually gaining more wisdom? And that's something that we do have to question. But how do we gain that wisdom? How do we become more wise? Because we're not born with wisdom, we're not inherently born with wisdom. Wisdom is a virtue. It's something that's gained. We have to work through life in order to experience it. And I think that there are even some religions or some cultures that believe that wisdom can be passed down from generation to generation. But I think that also maybe that wisdom is something that is wisdom in a different way, where it's like those generations that are getting passed down that wisdom, maybe it's wisdom because of the way that that child was brought up, the way that that child was spoken to, and it's like you gain wisdom in that way. We gain wisdom of how to live in our lives, how to live in ourselves as we go through life, and as we grow into human beings. And I think that that's kind of where that wisdom is passed down, and that's how we continue to pass down wisdom. If we seek to find wisdom in our lives, surround yourself with people that are wise, with people that have had that experience. I may have spoken about this before, but when I was in Costa Rica, there was this guy that I met, and he worked in this small restaurant, like kind of in the middle of the jungle. And we were with a group of people, and he had spoken to a couple of us, and he was maybe 23 at the time, and I think I was maybe 20, 21 at the time, very not far off from his age. But he was someone who was orphaned as a child. He didn't know his parents, and he wasn't in a foster care system because there weren't any foster care systems where he was born. So he traveled the world. He just like traveled around and surrounded himself with people that he was able to gain knowledge from. And that's one of the first things that he said. He said, always surround yourself with people that are smarter than you, so that you can gain knowledge from them, rather than surrounding yourself with people that are only going to take knowledge from you and not give you anything back. And he also said, these boundaries that we have in the world, they're meant to divide us. He said, just as a dog will walk from one country to another, it doesn't need a passport because it's part of the land, just as humans are part of the land. So remember that as we move through life, that these boundaries, these things that are meant to divide us, they're an illusion, so to speak, and it's like we have to remember that we're all part of the land and that we're all connected in that way. So, connect and feel comfortable connecting with the other humans that are on the other side of that line. So Those are the two things that you said. But in that statement, surrounding yourself with people that are smarter than you, it's surrounding yourself with people that are maybe more wise than you, that have had more experience than you. And I know that I was just speaking about how intelligence and IQ isn't something that's necessarily contingent upon wisdom, but when you surround yourself with people that are smarter than you or more wise than you, it doesn't necessarily mean that they've had any formal education. I mean, I would love to be friends with this dude that was in Costa Rica, because he had an exceptional amount of, he was very well spoken, very like intelligent. I think he spoke like 7 different languages, but also like very young and didn't have a formal education, never had a formal education. Yet he was very, very wise and was exceptionally knowledgeable. And I think that as we gain wisdom, we gain the wisdom to realize that we want to explore more and understand more in the world. And I think that's what gives us that intelligence. It's like our wisdom to realize that we want something more, that there is something more that drives us to those new places, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in the form of like formal education, because that can be very limiting. It is very limiting in many domains, but it can be in a domain of just going out and experiencing something in life that you've always wanted to do, because our life lessons are something that's the biggest learning lessons in our lives. So surround yourself with those people by putting yourself out there, starting to kind of tap into those things that you've always wanted to do, and the people that are in those domains, the people that you can gain that wisdom from, will start to come into your life. But we have to start moving towards those things. We have to start realizing that those are the people I want in my life, because until we realize that, we're going to stay with the people who are around us that may be draining our energy. I was speaking about earlier about just how through all of that, through all those experiences, we may feel as though like, am I any wiser? Did I grow wiser through this experience? And I think that just like wisdom can't really clearly be defined, it can't clearly be measured. We can't clearly say that I'm this much more wiser than I was before. Of course you can say you're wiser than yesterday. I think that's a fact that we can all kind of say if we reflect on it. We're a little bit wiser than yesterday. But I think wisdom is something that's very hard to see. And there's this book that I got at a Buddhist monastery in Ukiah. It's Temple of 10,000 Buddhas. If many of you have heard of it or are in California or near Ukiah, you can check it out. They welcome people to come in, experience their culture, experience their prayer and like their daily routine, and they welcome donations, of course. So donate, and they really great people that are very open to sharing their practices. But I got this book from this Buddhist monastery that's there, and it's called Words of Wisdom, Volume 2, Practice. It's by Venerable Master Xian Hui. I'm not really sure if I'm saying that right. I looked up like the audio definition of it, or like how to pronounce it, but I think I still got that wrong. But anyway, in this book there was a interesting quote that I think is just really amazing and does speak to this idea of the wisdom and the growth of wisdom within us as we go through life. So this is it. Consider the grass in springtime. We may not notice its growth, yet it keeps getting taller and taller every day. Wisdom develops in the same way. Of course, there's a lot more to that passage, but I think that speaks so much to a lot of the growth that we experience in our life, not just with wisdom, but with many things, but wisdom as well. Like grass grows very slow. If you try to sit there and watch the grass grow, then you'll be sitting there for a long time, and you may not even notice it growing because you're sitting there constantly. And I think that a lot of times that we try to gain more knowledge or gain more wisdom or understanding in any domain, we don't really realize the change until we kind of look away and then look back. It's like we have to like strive forward and keep moving forward, but know that it is growing. It's like, although like you turn away from it or turn away from paying attention to how much it's growing, it's still growing. As long as you're tending to it, as long as it's getting water, as long as it's getting fresh air, like it's going to continue to grow. So know that you are gaining wisdom. Know that you are growing closer to where you want to be in life. Even if you don't understand where that is, know that you are growing closer, just like the grass is growing. But it's going to be something that if you keep paying attention to it, it's going to seem like it's not happening, but it is. And I think that that's something that gives me confidence in knowing that when I'm kind of confused or feeling like I'm stuck in some kind of situation, I know that the grass is still growing, that motion is still happening, that movement is still happening, that change is still happening, and that it will be in the place that I want it to be at some point. But just to kind of realize that it's happening. And I think that realization alone just brings comfort for me personally. And I mean, I can't obviously speak for all of us, but it speaks to me in that way. And I think that, as we gain this knowledge, as we go through the world and surround ourselves with these people that are giving us this knowledge, the biggest part of all of it is, how are we utilizing it? What are we doing with this knowledge? And I believe that, like, not only are we meant to gain this knowledge, but share it with others. Use your wisdom to impact the world around you, impact your own life, the lives of the people that are around you. Like, utilize that wisdom, because it's just like hoarding precious metals. Like, if you are just like hoarding your diamonds and silvers and vault and not really utilizing it, then it's like, what use is it? It's like, it's very precious. Yes, of course, it's worth millions, it's worth billions, but it's worthless just sitting and collecting dust. Utilize your knowledge, utilize your wisdom, use it to help the people around you, and be in the world in a responsible way, because I think that as we gain wisdom, I think that there are all those other traits that come along with us. Responsibility, because as we start realizing that we understand more and that we can be more in a situation, we're a little more responsible in that way. Where it's like, just like a child may see someone fall and may not recognize that that person may be hurting. As we gain wisdom, we can recognize that and utilize that wisdom to say, hey, do you need a hand? Do you need help? But it's like, it's these different forms of knowledge and understanding, and the utilization of that in different situations, that is the wisdom that we need to utilize or seek to utilize in different ways. So I don't know what wisdom is. I think that as I started looking through this topic, I think that it just opened a lot more doors of what wisdom could possibly be. Our experiences, our lives, and how we're translating that into the world around us, and how we're translating that within the world within us. It's like, what does it all mean for us, and how are we making use of it? Because I think at the end of the day, we're not gaining it for no reason. So what are we going to use it for? How are we going to use it? And how are we going to keep that going? Because I think that it's a never-ending journey. So that's basically all I have for this episode. I think that there's so much more that can be said. The idea of wisdom, again, it's something so wise. I mean, it's something that's so vast, and I think that it's good reason why there are so many people that are still speaking about it, still studying it, still trying to understand what wisdom is, because it's really something that I think it's probably not the best idea to try to seek a solid definition for it, because I think you'll be searching for a long time. But, I think that, it's definitely something that we can all relate to in some way. And I think that's something that we all seek to understand more of. So yeah, that's all I got. If y'all have any ideas or questions or comments, or just any topics or anything, you can send this to everything.sunpodcast@gmail.com. You can join the Instagram page at everything.sunpodcast. You can join the Twitter page at everysunpodcast, or you can join the Facebook group at Everything Under the Sun with Ty. And yeah, that's all I got. I will link the videos, and I will even link the book, in case. I'm sure you can order online or something. But yeah, that's all I got. Love you all, and I will see you next time.